So thank you for joining us for our Celebrating Black Futures. I am Tatiana Swansea, Restorative Practices Coordinator with the Oak Park Public Library. We're very excited and grateful to have with us Juarez Hawkins, Maya Marshall, and JSteezzy. And also here is Margita from the library, who will be helping out with this Zoom program and questions on the chat. The way this program will work is the first half, we will talk with each artist and storyteller, and each person has prepared a presentation or performance, so we'll get to experience their art. And then in the second half of the program, we'll have a conversation where we can all talk on a few subjects. And I think Margita put it in the chat as well. If you have any questions that come up, you are welcome to type it in the chat. She'll monitor it and we'll try to get to some of them. All right, we are going to start with Juarez Hawkins, and a little bit about Juarez. She is an artist, educator, and curator. As co-curator of the gallery programs at Chicago State University, she has organized exhibitions from the permanent collection, as well as student work and established artists. Recent curatorial projects include Black Clay at Chicago State, Radical Futures at the Museum of Contemporary Art, and Bill Walker, Urban Griot at the Hyde Park Art Center. Juarez is also a member of Sapphire and Crystals, a collective of African-American female artists. So thank you. I'm so excited to talk with you.
Thank you for having me.
And then, so I'm just going to ask you a few questions before you show your presentation. One thing is, I know you are a second generation artist, and you're from Chicago as well. So you're very, I imagine, deeply rooted in the artist community and the Chicago community. And I'm curious, growing up that way, when did you know that you were an artist? And also just a little bit about the path that you took to all of the wonderful work that you do now.
Well, growing up, when you grow up in a creative home, there was never a time where I wasn't creative, because you're immersed in it, you're around it, you're helping your mother prime her canvases and things. I'm able to write on the walls with impunity as a young kid. So I was never like not creative. I didn't really call it being an artist till maybe I was in college, and I decided I no longer wanted to major in engineering, because I was all about like, I got to have that profession to make money. I don't want to be a poor artist and everything. And I let that go to minor in art. I did continue. My first degree is in computer studies, which will factor into what I talk about later. But in terms of really starting to claim it and nurture it and develop it, probably college and beyond. And then in terms of pathway, I was always an artist who believed in having a hustle and having a regular gig, for better or for worse. And so I came out of undergrad and worked in data processing for about 6 years. I programmed computers, but at the same time, I was able to use that money to do things like launch a line of greeting cards, go take art classes on the weekends, do some of the creative things I wanted to do, because I had the financial wherewithal to do it, if not necessarily all the time in the world, and took advantage of being able to do like local art fairs. And so like little, church bazaars and things sponsored by our company or local organizations, moved in from there into doing art fairs. And then into, I think my first gallery show was maybe about 1990. And so I did like my first gallery show, and that got really good to me. So I started doing more of those, because art fairs are really weather intensive and labor intensive. And from there, I came into a collective called Sapphire and Crystals, which is a collective of African-American female artists. And I began to exhibit fairly widely with them. And that really helped put my star on the map. Let's see, I went back to school around 1998, thereabouts, and decided after about 10 years of doing graphic design, again, always having that hustle to support the career, I decided to go back to school so that I can teach. And so I got my master's in 2001 and pretty much have been teaching ever since, because I just needed something to like stimulate my mind. Spending all my life in front of a computer, I felt my mind starting to like gel. You know? And so being in the classroom and actively kind of applying my trade and helping other people, you know, learn how to do that creatively, you know, has really been a blast. The curatorial work kind of happened really as a happy accident. The curator at Chicago State wanted to retire, and they wanted to keep the program going. So I stepped in. Me and another gentleman named Tom Lucas, we run the programs there. And it's really a lot of fun. I'd never realized how much I would enjoy doing curatorial work. And so one thing has led to another. I've been fortunate to get really good grant funding for those kinds of curatorial projects, like the Bill Walker project. That was a fairly large, significant project. I won a Terra grant for that, or co-authored a Terra grant, I should say. And from there, it's just really been like one blessing after another. I've been getting different curatorial gigs and different ways to sort of flex a different type of creative muscle. So that's kind of, I think that's the short story.
That's amazing. Thank you. Yeah, so you kind of touched on it. Do you also want to talk a little bit about some of the things that really inspire your art in particular, or motivate the art that you create?
Sure. Some of it is rooted in sort of ancestral culture. I have a really strong interest in African pottery. I moved into ceramics around 2007 or so and just really got hooked, coming from a painting background. And I'm very interested in those traditional art forms, kind of the way the first people made the first pots and how did we work with that clay. And so that influence comes into my work, but I'm also very interested in finding my own way of doing it rather than just mimicking Benin or Mangbetu or Cameroon pottery or something like that. And then there are tons of influences right here stateside. Marva Jolly as a clay mentor, Anna Tyler as a print mentor, ancestors like Elizabeth Catlett, and that can, you know, that can take up an hour lecture in and of itself. But definitely African culture, history, lineage is popping up quite a bit in my work. And, you know, you'll see when I get to the presentation too, how some of those things come up. And then a lot of introspection, a lot of navel gazing. I do quite a bit of that, a lot of self-portraiture as well. But we'll see some of that in the program too.
All right. Well, I love navel gazing, and now we can. That's a great time to move into your presentation.
All righty. Well, let's see if we can get the tech right here. Let's try this out. Hey, I did it. I did it. All right. So there's no particular chronology to this in terms of when I made the work. I just pulled work together to sort of support different stories. I'm also going to set a timer to keep me honest. So let's do this. If come on. There we go. Some of the work I do in ceramics, a lot of people call them masks. I think of them as characters. This one in particular is speaking to my love of gardening, my love of nature, and kind of how the way things grow, my fascination with it. Hence, I'm calling it the earth that feeds me. I'm a very avid urban gardener. I really love, you know, foraging and making herbal concoctions and all that sort of stuff. So this piece really speaks to that. So this is a hand painted ceramic piece. Most of the work that you'll see here is in clay. So let's see here. I did it. As I am getting a little older, those things are on my mind and they are popping up in my work, not necessarily in a fearful way, but really as a counter to that societal notion that we're supposed to be old and dried up and invisible once we hit a certain age, which I think is really crazy, because it can really be a time of great blossoming and great understanding of yourself and getting rid of a whole lot of hangups and things like that. So these pieces really celebrate that meditation on aging, that idea that even time and clocks are popping up a lot in my work. And so I am very more cognizant of the finite aspect of this lifetime here. but at the same time about, let's enjoy it to the fullest. Let's celebrate it. Let's not get caught up in the societal mind stuff, for lack of a better word. These here are kind of statements of the human condition. Being a very, very busy woman, I thought it would be really whimsical to put that in the work. So the piece on the left is an actual to-do list. It actually it's called from the many, many, many Post-its that litter my desk on a regular basis, from writing syllabi and doing estate sales or whatever. And then down towards the bottom, as we get to the bottom of it, there's more of that exhortation to create and pray and rest and all those sorts of things. So kind of that busyness, and then the antidote at the bottom. The one over on the right is not necessarily speaking to a fractured soul, though, the shrinks may think differently. It really happened as what we call a happy accident in art. I had crafted the piece, I'd let it dry for a while. I picked it up the wrong way by mistake. I know better, and I broke it. But it was still at a place where it was somewhat malleable, and some just said, slice it up, which I fought against. It's like, oh my God, I can't slice up my work. It's my work. And so like, come on, slice it up, just go on and do it. And so it's more of a statement about following my intuition. So I took a tool and I sliced the piece up, and the pieces that you see there. And then as I sat there looking at the pieces, I was like, wouldn't it be cool to make it look like it's sitting there fractured? So that was really about creating the illusion of it being a broken piece. It actually is one solid piece. I sort of reworked it so that it just has that illusion. That's what I was aiming for. So, it speaks more to that following the intuition. And also in here, the beginnings of me starting to create my own markings. I became interested in creating sort of my own hieroglyphics. So this was probably from a time I was still like carving those little puppies in. I started making little symbols for artist tools and artist processes and stuff. These pieces here sort of tie into a longer standing story. We're all familiar with like the American Girl series, which in a way, I think, doll merchandising notwithstanding, I think is a really cool set of stories of little girls who grow up in different periods in our history. And with that, I said, well, wouldn't it be cool if we had a little African girl that went through maybe different countries? And I'm saying this as an American living on the other side with only a limited understanding of motherland culture and so on. But still, it's like, wouldn't that be a plucky little adventure? So I've been crafting this story of a little girl who grows up in like 12th century Benin, who wants to carve. Her dad is a court sculptor, and she wants to study. And so she convinces her father to let her go away and study. And when she comes back, the land has been scattered because, there's all the involvement with the Portuguese in Benin and so on. So there were, tribal wars, and the land has been scattered and her people are gone. So the whole adventure revolves around her traveling through these lands, looking for signs, trying to find out who her people are, where have they gone, what became of them. And so the pieces, these different pieces, they started as monoprints, evolved into paintings, and moved into sculptures, were about the artifacts she left behind. I was always curious about like, Benin, when you look at Benin sculpture, you can always like sort of like, dang, that looked like Cousin Larry or Uncle Elmo or someone. And I've always been curious about those parts of us that are like African underneath, and what kind of veneers have we put over that as Americans. It's, kind of just something that's been in my head for a while. So tying in that story, the artifacts have moved from monoprints, which you see up front, into paintings, which I did for a good while. And with the paintings, they got interesting to me because I started doing them on little chunky canvases, and they would stand up like little books or something like that. And it's like, wow, they have a presence. I can kind of feel them. And that kind of led to where it's going these days. So it moved from just the tribe to the guardians, this idea of these people who are guarding the stories or guarding the symbols or guarding the gree or whatever. And they also work well because, again, as representations of something that's being left behind, this is something that's more enduring, and that idea that it could actually conceivably have been left behind. So I've been working this body of work for quite a while. It speaks to the influence of Marva Jolly in terms of the long, kind of tall pottery. I really just love that format. But I also needed to find a way to make it my own rather than just sort of mimicking her style. So it's kind of that American influence, that African American influence combined with these ideas of ritual pottery and different African cultures that have this specialized figurative pottery that's often part of some sort of ritual. And that's still very engaging to me. So that's where that story is going. It's the Ifani story is kind of an ongoing thing. And one day I'm going to actually write the book. This body of work here speaks to my own fascination with technology. I spoke to having a background in computer studies and, years working as a programmer. So I can write a little code if suitably pressed, and always like tinkering with Macintoshes and stuff. I was in the game at the onset of the desktop publishing boom and followed tech and trends and stuff, and really still love the stuff very, very, very much, even, figuring out Zoom. And so I'm interested in that sort of blending. I guess the split face thing is popping up perennially in my work, but that intersection of humanity and technology, how we're bending it, flexing it, getting used to it. Are we becoming androids? So they're really kind of little speculative, quiet pieces that I've been chewing on this whole CyberRes series. So kind of tying in a little steampunk, and then also getting into the ones and O's deal with binary code, which is really at the root of just about anything that happens on a computer. But that's another lecture for a different time. And more recently, I've been playing with that idea as prints. These are actually lino cuts and still really rooted in that woman, machine, mechanical, human kind of interaction. The one on the right's a little bit more recent, kind of playing with the idea of us having to wear masks. It's like, well, if I take that mask off, are you going to find lips? Or are you going to find like my computer circuit board or something? So again, something else that I'm chewing on. That'll be, again, another ongoing project. Moving from personal practice into teaching practice, these are some of the curricula from different projects. I've worked with young cultural stewards with the Chicago Park District. We've done different collaborative projects working, goodness, I could talk about that for like a whole nother hour. But again, we've worked with artists like Hector Duarte, Tanika Johnson, and developed just really cool projects for kids we're working probably as young as 4 to 5 up through the early teens. So with the young cultural stewards. And I could talk about that at, a little bit more in depth later. My most recent project, again, with young cultural stewards, since we couldn't really do as much, face-to-face programming, we've moved into doing podcasts. So I am now the voice of Auntie Rez, and I can read stories to your kids, your nieces, your nephews, your grandkids. And I'm looking for stories that have like positive messages, positive themes, and things to kind of help educate, but also tie in with different art projects. So we're now working on some things that'll tie in art projects with the podcast as well. And I am about like 5 seconds shy of my time, so I'm going to call it quits there. And so that's where you can find me if you're interested, if you want to see my most recent work. And with that, I'm going to turn it over.
Thank you so much. That flew by. I'm glad you were keeping time because I was just like, so I'm excited to talk more with you soon. So now we're going to move on to Maya Marshall and a little bit about Maya. She is a writer and editor and co-founder of Underbelly, a journal on the practical magic of poetic revision. She's also an educator, having taught at Northwestern and Loyola University, Chicago. She holds fellowships from MacDowell, Vermont Studio Center, Callaloo, The Watering Hole, Community of Writers, and Canum. She is the author of Secondhand, and her writing appears in Best New Poets 2019, Muzzle, Rhino, Potomac Review, Blackbird, and elsewhere. She lives in Chicago. She is a manuscript editor for Haymarket Books. Thank you so much, Maya, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm so pleased to be with you.
ask you also a few questions before we move into your performance that you have for us. So just starting off, can you speak a little bit on your path to either becoming a poet or knowing that you're a poet and recognizing that as your profession and career?
I mean, sure. I think Juarez and I have something in common in that we were raised by people who are makers. So my mom was a writer and a dancer and an arts organizer and curator for our children's museum. And so, you know, there was artists in my home, and that was the norm. And I'm bookish and introverted and quiet, and you know, it's harder to tell these days, but also very shy. Uh, and so, um, and so the page was always a safe place for me to go. I was a kid that like hid under the blankets with a flashlight and a book, and I was supposed to be sleeping. Um, and now I just leave the light on because I'm grown and I do what I like. Um, and yeah, because I was shy to speak and had a particular and unusual voice as a kid, I was inclined to be quiet, and so I wrote instead. And because I am enamored of the cadences in language, poetry is one of my first loves. So I would do things like skip school to go to the bookstore or the museum and read poems there, which is silly, but I'm glad I did it. Uh, and you know, I tried to be a pragmatist. I thought, oh, I'll be a classroom teacher, but I don't like teaching in K-12 classrooms. I mean, I've learned some aptitude with it, but it requires a kind of performance on the day-to-day that I'm not really equipped to do all the time. It's not. It's a lot more natural to me to be in conversation in a college classroom because the people there are adults. Um, And so it's easier to talk to them about the ideas they have about the world at large rather than sort of um, listening to borrowed ideas and investing the kind of support that classroom teachers are like Herculean for giving. They're, you know, it takes a particular kind of person to be a middle school teacher. You have to be incredibly patient and generous and like rigid. Um, and like, I just am not that. So it's more fun for me to talk to people who are just becoming their full adult selves about the ways that sonic texture work on page and how images drive stories. And um, it takes a while to get into that position to be able to be a full-time professor, to believe in oneself enough to do it, because imposter syndrome, I think, has a stronger hold on folks who are women and people who are people of color. And it has certainly had a hold on me many different phases of my career journey. But at the end of the day, I do really love watching how the architecture of language works on a page and works across the text. And that way I'm skilled as an editor and was able, after leaving graduate school, to take the editing track and also teach community workshops and teach in universities, um, which is, you know, which are one of the few places where we're talking about literature is sacred. Uh, and that's my thing. I dig talking about literature. So that's how I got here. I happen to just love the practice of making poems. I'm fascinated by sound sculptures and by um, rendering an image that has movement and that has sound and that has a visual motion, which is difficult. So it's a challenge I try to rise to regularly.
Thank you for, I'm just thinking over your response. It's interesting to compare those different skills or qualities of personality that comes from maybe the work that Juarez does with children versus your own work. And I'm also very shy, but hide it. So I definitely, or not, or have found a way to work with it. Second question, And this is probably a very broad question, but do you want to speak to some or one thing that really inspires your poetry, or that you're drawn to writing about, or how you conceptualize that?
Sure. In a practical sense, if I'm trying to get into the space to practice writing, uh, reading poems and listening to music and looking at pieces of artwork, talking to other artists, those things are inspirations. Or I think, oh, this is an interesting form, or here's an aperture I could use if I wanted to tell this particular story. Uh, what I write about, the sense of urgency from wherever out in the world it comes, is the thing that draws me to sitting down at the page when I'm not just doing it for like practice to honor like that I tell myself I'm a poet and writer, and so I'm like, oh, you should poet and write. You should do that if you were claiming this title. Um, Sometimes it's that I'm walking down the street and I see smoke coming out of the top of a crematorium, and I think somebody has to be in there pushing the buttons. And like, what is that life? What does it mean to end and become smoke um, on like a beautiful spring day? You know, and that I think there's always a poem in that. I more often than not am writing about my family uh, or families like ours, and women and their men, uh, and the relationships that we say are love, with both the grace and the pain involved in those things. And so, like, everyday people are the things that are inspiring to me. I am attached to writers like Audre Lorde and June Jordan and Sonia Sanchez, and like those are some of my first writers. Nikki Giovanni, right, who writes about just the quotidian, right, and sort of uphold this idea of everyday use as being something of particular importance. And so those people, those women, are the things that inspire me.
And then my final question is that your magazine or journal that you co-founded focuses on poetic revision, and it'll feature drafts of poems, and then the final or finals can be version. And you also work as an editor. Uh, can you speak a little bit to your interest or passion about revision, or the art of revision?
Sure. My thinking is that writing is mostly revision. Sometimes you get that sort of draft that comes out fully formed, and you're like, nice. Thanks for this gift, universe. But often it's not quite what you mean, or it's not quite fully realized. And because I spend time in various types of classrooms, but also my day-to-day job is to have conversations with writers about exactly what they meant, and how they got there, and then offer them suggestions for how to get there. Um, Sort of demystifying what is usually intentionally veiled, the sort of act like practical choices that writers make. Um, I think invites more people into the world of making poems and making stories. Um, it is a sacred place, writing and poetry, but the sacred shouldn't be exclusive. Um, the same way that like churches are open, so should poetry be. And it, popularly is not, people feel locked out. So having a journal that says, here's where I started, here's where I ended, and like just prose about how I got there, helps people say, oh, I could do that. I could subtract 5 syllables, or, so I started with the horse. Maybe I should end with the donkey, or whatever, whatever method allows them to get from having what, say, Chris Abani would call a snapshot versus having a photograph, right, that has composition, that it's not just about um, a family we don't know, but one that makes us think of the ones that we do know, you know. So yeah, writing is in the revision most of the time, and my day-to-day life is like, is this what you mean? What other way could you tell this to me? Which is essentially what it means to be in a classroom. is that what you mean? How else might you say this? Yeah. And then I do it to myself. And I'm like, I don't know what I mean. I want to watch TV.
And on that note, instead of watching TV, you can please share with us some of your work.
Sure. I will do just that. I'm going to read two things. I think that they will take 8.5 minutes. Let's see. Let's find out. Just to say, I'm happy to be with all of you, and I'm excited to hear your work, and I'm grateful to have been invited into the space. Counting deer at Labaw Woods. There will be no preface. I'm just going to see how it goes. 2020 is the year I returned to my body. Light years from 16, when I decided to chase a version of me. Now I'm living in the future with my tattoos and hiking boots. Girl with her intrepid heart, crooked spine. I spent evenings and Saturdays walking down the vestiges of the Union Pacific inside an aisle of milkweed. My teacher tells me I like to put things in my basket, but I don't use them. Maybe she's right. Maybe I just like to save them to show to someone special. You're special. I have a litany of flowers and a crooked foot. This is the year I see all 4 seasons sober. For a year I've nested, settled into a home that I made, while I lamented all the fissured homes I come from, while I lamented all the men, women, and children slain in the street, threatened in the parks as they birded or took photos of their newborns or held hands with their beloved. I was forced inside by a virus, granted a window to the world by the internet, and like many other people, I took the opportunity to go to the remaining open natural spaces in my city. Sanctuary is a word for it. Sanctuary is the home of grace. I think grace is a practice of level-gazed awareness, acceptance, and letting go. Grace is what I give myself when I start the couch to 5K. Today I can only walk. It is what I offer myself internally when I push into downward dog. Breathe into your calves. It is a gift. It is a gift I give my younger selves. Oh, you only knew what you knew. I am learning this year to give myself grace, like the God I would like to talk to. I say I, and I mean those who harmed me. I say I because this is where I begin. It is how I can grant myself a future. It's my first sober year in a long time, and there's a learning curve. I offer myself the grace of knowing this body is not what it was, but that it is still good, still mine. This body with its life-giving properties, a return to its breathing, sanctuary, a consecrated place devoted to the keeping of sacred things. This year, I count myself. I count myself among the sacred like the trees, the prairie grass, the 3 bucks I've seen since spring. In the spring, red buds burst, and copper mushrooms, and here on the other side of the solstice, brown and ice, brown and ice, brown and ice. Here in the forest preserve, still 1 buck walks along the shore, shakes his antlers through a triangular crevice, saunters forth, and browses leaves. On the other bank of this river, which here has become a pond, a dead and swelling doe carcass lay finished, and near the color of the earth, she lay there, returning to earth. As the pollution in India clears and the people stay inside, this year post-nicotine and alcohol during a global catastrophic respiratory catastrophe amid racial eruption, this woman is alive. For today, it is not the story of a woman dying. It is the story of a safe Black woman, a safe Black man, taking a picture of a loose rooster in a city park. It is a wooded ecosystem managed by conservationists. It's the future, and I take myself for walks. Me, the trees, neon orange running shoes against the dull rays of overcast sun. I carried myself on my breath, on my weak ankle and bunion, reminded myself with every stride, yes, I am alive. Yes, I am breathing. Yes, my breath will carry me forward. I'm not talking to myself. I'm in the woods and the trees can hear me, and the teens necking by the fire they made. I'm finding a sanctuary and ritual. Any practice done regularly, repeated in a set, precise manner so as to satisfy one's sense of fitness, and often felt to have a symbolic significance. I am back in the park, another day in the 350 since I entered quarantine, since I left drunkenness, and on another day I lace my orange shoes and run with the names in my heart, Ahmad, Elijah, Brianna, and I hear only my voice in my head. I love you. I am alive. I am breathing. I take care of you. 1, 2, 3, 4. In the same park. On another day, I am not running, but walking. There is a young man dressed as Frankenstein's monster, and locals taking pictures, and one of my favorite 6-year-olds is frightened, but interested, and I want more of that for her. On another day, we saw a deer in a field, and Lo screamed and screamed as her mother asked for quiet. Lo wanted the deer to give back her attention. She wanted to flex her 6-year-old power and disperse. The little girl with the intrepid heart and all sorts of fury. It has been hours and days. It has been months. I have been counting deer for 2 years, some dead on the highway, many living in this forest, in this span of days, just shy of a year. I have seen all 4 seasons, spring, ice cold rain and geese, summer, fresh graffiti, I want to kiss you, autumn, garbage in the river, a Marvin Gaye woodcutting tacked to a tree asks, what's going on? Winter, brambles, a falcon, someone else's coma, someone else's sickness, clamshell mushrooms, a convocation of branches built up to look like witches' quarters. Forts, a found dead dog and 14 miles to the botanical garden, where 200-year-old bonsais stretch in their slowest dance. I've been wondering about the relationship between sanctuary and vulnerability. I think a sanctuary is a place where you can enter and feel sheltered, even at your most vulnerable, like a womb, or a bathroom, or the woods, or yourself if you're lucky. It's a place where, exposed to the elements, your presence is part of the natural cycle, free from moral bargain. This year, in my ritual, my daily walk or run to the park and through the neighborhood, I've caught myself many times, knowing how safe it can feel to remember how small I am in a cosmos full of indifferent wilderness. All right, one more. I like to read this one because it's like a kind of a love story. You ask me what inspires me. Sometimes it's artwork. I saw a photograph and I wrote this poem. The lovers in the photograph. The men, one inched into the cleft of his love's thighs, wait under the eye of the sun and the bullseye of the camera's lens as a white witness documents Black love on a late spring day in Chesapeake, Virginia. One, eyes closed, lips resting against his fellow's cheekbone. The other, eyes open, stares forward, soft-browed, as if he's just opened his eyes. 2 moles make a base cleft of the curve of his left eye. Or a colon. One exposure in this one frame. Loose clothes betray a slim collarbone, a meaty bicep, 2 modest black bellies, sun-coppered and hairy. The slightest catch in a fold, a clasp on an elbow. The lovers caught, lean into each other away from the leaves in front of the building, hold their spot on the blacktop of the complex's parking lot, locked as if in bronze. I have never seen a monument like this. Do-rag and chin-strap mustache, brawn-armed bear with a fresh, tight fade. I've lived at the corner of Confederate and Lincoln, spat on the stone feet of a gynecological barbarian, seen equestrians erected high above men's heads, but never yet two sleek, wide noses or one man's neck tilted in supplication, mouth slit open to let the air dart in, hands wound lightly around a waist and lower back, knuckles alit on a broad dockered thigh. Two men spun like blossoming vines, shining in the splendor of two like soldiers and love, and light, not shadow. But here the woman's eye has arrested our fellows in dewy day, without labored sweat or defiant glances, not off guard or posed, but seeming free and seeming safe in the baleen of each other's embrace. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. I'll take a moment, let that soak in. So, last but not least, we are talking to JSteezzy, and I will introduce a little bit about him, and then we'll talk a little, and then you'll perform for us, which I'm so excited about. So, his name off stage is Jalen Sharp, but we can call him JSteezzy. He is a junior and currently attends Oak Park River Forest High School. He is from the south side of Chicago, yep, as the rest of his family, and has been making music part-time for about 2 years now, which is incredible once you hear the music. That's only been 2 years. He has music on all platforms, including Apple Music, Spotify, SoundCloud, and so on. And he has one EP titled TBH with 3 singles, along with 3 singles and 2 mixtapes on SoundCloud. Some of his interests outside of music are basketball, playing video games, hanging out with family and friends, and watching anime. Thank you, Jim. So excited to talk more with you. Can you talk a little bit about how you got into making music, and then the process a little bit of making your first EP?
Okay. Well, growing up, music has always been like a foundation in my family. You know, my mother raised me Usher, 90s R&B to the max. My grandma was a big Marvin Gaye. My father was a rapper as well, so literally all around me was music. So it was almost inevitable that I did something with music. But you said, okay, I kind of forgot the question a little. I kind of forgot the question.
So that's on me. I write long questions and everyone is very forgiving of me. Just basically how you got into music, which you answered, and then you made your first EP recently. If you want to talk about that. Yeah.
My first EP titled TBH, which has 2 abbreviations, obviously, to be honest, and then the abbreviation that I came up with is to be heard. I really I'm a big advocate on making sure artists all throughout, not just Chicago, that's because that's where I'm from, but all throughout the world have a stage to be heard. We all have the right to be heard. It's a human right. And so with this EP, I really wanted to show vulnerability. I wanted to show just more about me in general, just more about me and the way I came up and things I'd never really talked about in my music. And so that's why I called it to be honest, because I'm being honest here.
So you answered a bit question I've asked everyone, which is, what inspires your music. So you can continue to answer that, or you can talk a little bit about, you said you talked about things for the first time in your music that you haven't in a while. How is that? Or
I've never been, I'm a, how do I put it? It's like I'm talkative, but I don't talk. You know what I'm saying? I've always had a problem showing my vulnerability. I've always had problems just expressing myself to people in general. So with this EP, one of my main focal points was to be very vulnerable, was to be very open, very free, and be relatable, because I know what I go through. many people around the world may go through as well. So like things talking about my depression, um, touchy situations with me and my family and my siblings and my mother and my father and things of those things. Things I never really talked about in my music, and I portrayed it here, and I felt, and after I released it, it's like a whole bunch of weight just left. I still have weight, but a whole lot left. So I felt good. I felt very proud. I felt very accomplished. And my family, they felt extremely proud for me. They were proud, they were more proud for me than I was for myself. And it was very shocking. But I was very happy. It came out recently. It just came out on December 18th. So it's not like it wasn't just 2 months ago, but it was very, it feels like longer than what it was for me. I don't know why, it just does.
That's beautiful. I really respect that, and I'm happy. I know that just made me very happy. Thank you. So you are still a student and you're making music part-time.
Yes.
I myself work full-time and go to school, and I feel like, oh my gosh, how is it for you balancing?
It is extremely tough. I'm not going to sit here and lie like, oh my gosh, it's the most perfect blend, because it's not. It's very hard. Because for me, I kind of struggle with multitasking. I don't really do well with doing multiple things at once. So it's like, okay, if I focus on music now, then I'll lack in school, but I don't want to lack in school, because then that'll make me look bad as a student, and I want to go to good schools. And so then I'll focus on school, then I'll lack on music. And so actually recently with the EP, I found a good blend on how to incorporate music time and school time. And actually remote learning actually helped me a lot with school time and music time, because now I have school time and music time. I just said that 3 times in a row. But literally, that's what it is for me. It's kind of a struggle, but I'm starting to have a good schedule, and I'm starting to understand how to blend both things well.
Well, I appreciate your honesty. Sometimes, yeah, that's just how it is.
Yeah.
So, all right, I won't talk anymore. Very excited to hear your music.
Okay. The songs I have for you all today are songs off of my EP TBH. The first song that I'm going to perform is called Money Talks. It is about an artist and a record label. So here we go. Can everybody hear the speaker? Everybody can hear me well? Okay. Just letting the track play out a little bit, just a little bit. To alter my passion, the passionate must turn a quick buck into a big mansion. Must turn imagine a vision, I have it, that money reaction is my latest fashion. Must complete stuff, so quick and so young, to be young and rich. To be rich and dumb, I swear not to stun. It's not for that famous, they say money talks, so I'm learning that language. So I'll be fine if I ain't the greatest, but mama told me at the top I was aiming. We ain't second places like Anthony Davis, so Brack being the best, and that stuff really gracious. Cocky rappers, that stuff so contagious. To copy the collar, that's a lot for payments. Play me on playlists, got money for making, I'm signed to a label, or funds for raising. Money, fame, want it, gain, got it, shame, not happy, pain, money, fame, want it, gain, got it, shame, not happy, pain, hey. Artists to start out the hardest, to harvest their talents, to sell to the masses, to market a target, must harness your passion to stop you from walking the car, be the fastest. Rapper need money and money need owner. Label got levels that rapper think owe him. Rapper go label and label won't rapper, cause rapper can, oh man. Rapper some, oh man, this is rough. Label on rapper, but rapper or label, so rapper so records for food on the table. Rapper start knowing his money ain't massive. Label get most of their money from rapper. Rapper is broken, like how did this happen? Cause rapper was walking and car be the fastest. Money, fame, want it, game, got it, shame, not happy, pain, money, fame, want it, game, got it, shame, not happy, pain. Listen, label be smartest, playing the game of discovering artists. Label need records and label need numbers. Label got status, they got them resources. Label got car and it do be the fastest. Label found rapper and rapper got passion. Rapper need label, not label need rapper. Some rappers on label and label bought rapper. Rapper just growing and making it big. Label like ducks, they feeding on bread. Rapper so clueless, they getting finesse. Cause rapper get lowest while label big is. As rapper start growing, rapper do notice. Label make motives while rapper make lowest. Label on rapper know where rapper going. Cause label the driver while rapper walk slower. Money, fame, want it, game, got it, shame, not happy, pain, money, fame, want it, game, got it, shame, not happy, pain, ayy. To alter my passion, a passion, it must turn a quick buck into a big mansion. Must turn imagine a vision, I have it, that money reaction is my latest fashion. Must complete stuff, so quick and so young, to be young and rich, to be rich and dumb, must not to stun. It's not for that famous, they say money talks, so I'm learning that language, so I'll be fine if I ain't the greatest. But mama told me at the top always aiming, we ain't second places like Anthony Davis, so brag mean the best and that stuff really gracious. Cocky real rappers, that's just so contagious, to copy the counter, to sell out for payments. Play me on playlists, got money from making, I'm signed to a label, or funds for raising. That was my song, Money Talks. It's not a song that we're going. Thank you. Please quiet down the applause. The next song that I'm going to perform is called Family Ties. It's about my family ties. So let's go. I promise I won't mess this one up. Why do kids always gotta be the anchor? For parents to stay above water, cause mama love daddy, but daddy ain't father, so mama left daddy and daddy left mama. Son doesn't know why mama was saddened. He see mama crying, he asking what happened. Ma, why you crying? What makes you so saddened? Cause daddy was slacking, cause daddy be rapping. Daddy was up in Chicago to land. He come pick up son every now and then. When daddy see son, he call him JSteezzy. Then mama stop crying cause dad came to see me. Mama tell daddy take care of my son. Daddy ask Jalen and we go have fun. I smile so big cause daddy my hero. I tied up two people but string be so feeble. Ties. I'm talking about my family ties. I tried, oh I did try. But when you was born into madness, there isn't no fixing what happens. When I was younger, I didn't understand pain. Why ain't see grandparents in the same place and figure it out till I was like 8. Back in the day, they used to be married, they love at first sight. But grandma not happy because they always fight. So grandma love granddaddy, got on that flight. My mama was younger, she probably don't know it. My grandma was hurting, but probably ain't show it. Grandmama tell me that life really bogus, but life really long. No time for that loneliness. Got married in 20s, divorced in the 30s. Now grandmama 60s, she happy, I love it. Granddaddy struggle with life, he do show it. I really don't like him, don't want him to know it, but I cannot stand it with family and pain. Wanna be his hero, but gone is that strain. He called me JJ when I was like 8. He do got my number, but never called me. He wanted to know me. One time felt the same when dark days came. He went MIA. I really ain't seen him since I was 14, turning 17, about to graduate. I really do love him, don't want to be distant. This distance, some glimpses on family resentment. Ties. I'm talking about my family ties. I tried, oh, I did try. But when you was born into madness, there isn't no fixing what happens. Just pray you don't end up too damaged. Ties. I'm talking about my family ties. I tried, oh, I did try. But when you was born into madness, there isn't no fixing what happens. Daddy had son at 19. Daddy had world all up in his hands. Daddy had dreams. Daddy was rapping, but daddy wanted to chase him, so mama did let him. But daddy had children with multiple women. I got like 4 sisters, 2 brothers. What happened when daddy got shot? When daddy did pass, someone on the way. More kids with no dad. My grandma the anchor for all of the siblings. Grandmama struggled to help daddy children. Grandma was fighting for stuff on the side. She grandma was fighting for all of our lives, but grandma felt ill. See, grandma felt sick. The tie between siblings started to loosen, and Jalen ain't seen his 3 sisters and his little brother since about 2010, since he was about 6. We thought there was 4. What happened on 1? Her name was Alana. We 5 years apart. I do have a number, but be scared to call it. I love my little sister. She love me regardless. Battle for brother. I know I do love her. Then why am I scared to make sure she covered? At least say hello. Like, how are you doing? The battle for love, and I am just losing my other 3 sisters. I love them to death. If I don't not see them, my biggest regret. Could walk down the street, could walk in that Target, then ring on my stuff and I walk away harmless. Hoping one day we can meet in real life, get more closer together to see eye to eye. I just wrote the song, ain't write a damn lie. Trying to keep strings tight and family ties. Ties. I'm talking about my family ties. I tried, oh, I did try. But when you was born into madness, there isn't no fixing what happens. Just pray you don't end up too damaged. Ties. I'm talking about my family ties. I tried, oh, I did try. But when you was born into madness, there isn't no fixing what happens. Just pray you don't end up too damaged. That was my song, Family Ties. The next and final song I have for you all today is called Goodbye, Good Riddance. So here we go. I promised I wouldn't mess up, and I did go to my promise. I wrote this song about my depression. So this is one of the most vulnerable songs that I've ever written in life. So the song is very passionate to me. Hey, talking to man up in the mirror, vision too blurry, wish it was clearer, judging the way I wish he was thinner, but as he got older, got bigger and bigger. Underdog, see he never a winner, catalog out of order like error, constantly wishing he look a little different. He probably have sex, but the women won't let him. Some insecurities taking over these, start to grow in trees, stay in the shade of the darkness. The pain is the hardest, the lowest, the target where comfort is mostly felt. Mama told me that I'm one of a kind, it's just me all by myself, being special, low key, lonely, used to wish to be everyone else. How did that picture and image of brother and mirror that anchored and clever, no matter the club is the barber, the artist who constantly fade in the thoughts of losing me, missing the way that I used to smile. So I ain't seen the stuff in a while. It's quite a distance walking 8 miles. It wasn't moments, more lifestyle. Now I'm changing most of my ways. I'm swerving 290, heading stone in. Cause granny, the person, the woman who told me that being real, you was all you can be. Remember them days living on school street, me and mama, grandma being a family. That's what I say since I moved away. I ain't been the same since 2015. I'm saying goodbye. That's real damage up and inside. When I'm in public, I'm the funny guy. When I go home, I don't wanna cry. They say your jokes are great disguise. I hope people ain't realize the thorough joke I tried to hide. I love myself in the inside and even asked for some advice. I was too scared for sacrifice, being so numb to being too vulnerable. Ego denied and not surprised. Ever for stable, don't see your bed because outside just isn't nice. But when it's the bashing, constantly asking questions, no answers, you alright? And I'm saying goodbye. Cause I can't go into dope life with all this weight up in my mind, with all this pain and all all this strife, all this mental, real bad state. How do I change my way of life? Kept this stuff all up inside, cause I was scared of sacrifice. Thought this music stuff would help, but I still kept that in my mind. Wasn't ready, face them demons that I'm fighting all the time. Even when I sought out Jesus, still ain't feel presence of God. I said I prayers, does he hear me? If he does, why no reply? And I'm saying goodbye, and good riddance. Cause constant depression just ain't living. Cause you the hero on your own story, but depression when you also the villain. Notice I got more seconds of life than I do have those minutes. Does that glass half full type verse on a half empty is what I'm sipping. And I'll admit it, I ain't perfect, but I'm working on imperfects. I'm a person and I'm learning and I'm turning on my limits. If it's one thing I left from COVID, you get one chance, but I not quit it. To become human gets all the odds. It was you versus 44 trillion. I'ma go chase my dreams, finally love doing those things. Finally learn to love me, cause that's real love, never phony. And even though I got homies, a brother still feel a little lonely. But when you build a little different and many people being up closely, wearing hoodies every season, cause the people cause insecurity. Listening to loud music just to tune out the world, G. Try to hide all the stuff through security or immaturity. But this the letter that I'm writing, I'm done hiding, this the real me. And good riddance. Now I'm saying goodbye, and good riddance. Now I'm saying goodbye, and good riddance. Now I'm saying goodbye, and good riddance. Yeah. That was my song, Good Riddance. I mean, goodbye, good riddance. Let the track play out a little bit. And we clear.
Thank you so much. I'm honored, really.
Thank y'all so much. I want to give a big shout out to the two artists prior to me. Beautiful visual art, beautiful poetry. This is Black excellence at its pure definition. I love it. I love seeing stuff like this. This is awesome.
Yeah, you can have this job. Yeah. All right. Wow. All right. So we have time for a couple of questions, hopefully. And first, yes, and also I think we've gotten a couple of questions from the audience. You can type them in now too if you have them. One thing I meant to ask Juarez, and I didn't, and I'm pinching myself. And so I would like to ask it, and then also open it up to Maya and JSteezzy as well. And that question, I had watched an interview with you, Juarez, where you talked about how you created an African American art class in Chicago State because you saw art majors who were learning about everyone's history but their own. And that just really moved me personally. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about that and the importance as an artist of being able to learn and know your history.
It's been a pet project of mine, and I've been at it now it's probably about since 2009. And it was on the books, but no one had taught it. And I've been in Chicago State since 2006. And I'm like, well, they're learning about Renaissance and this one and that one and Baroque and then, which are all great. Nothing to take away from any of those cultures. However, it's like, well, we're predominantly Black school. Why are they not learning their own history? Why are they not learning their own culture? And so I had been doing it. I teach a class called Introduction to Visual Arts. And I've been using a lot of African-American references anyway, because I just felt like, well, maybe you might get the lesson a little better if it's couched with someone that looks more like you. And so I was able to cull from that over time and just really build it into my own class. And a lot of it is really, I think that we have a lot of aha moments in that classroom. You know, I just finished talking about the Black arts movement in Afrocobra, and it's blowing my mind that there are generations of young people that aren't being taught this stuff. It's not happening in the schools necessarily, unless you come to college and take this kind of class. And I just think that it's really heinous. It's a heinous omission. And I just took it upon my little self to try to do something about it. You know, we think about the term Sankofa, which, is a West African term, which means go back and get it. And that idea of going back and getting your history, understanding your lineage, one, it gives you a source of pride. It's like, wow, I start the class with a survey of African art forms. It's like our history didn't start with slavery. Our history goes back. Our creative history goes back really far. This is something we can uplift and hold, all the way to contemporary references like those little signs you see on the Dan Ryan. A Black man did that. A lot of the art you see on the red line, Dan Ryan trains, Black artists did that. And so by us knowing these things, we can hold our heads a little bit higher in a world that's constantly trying to slap us down, set us down, and so on. And so that's my creative contribution, because the creativity of our people is definitely linked to our history. You can't really separate the two. And so by understanding the art, it's an easier entry point into understanding that history. And I think our young people need it. I certainly needed it. I've learned so much by creating that course that I didn't know previously, that it's like, I just want to flood them. It's like, here, I'm going to shovel as much culture down your throat as you can swallow, because it's really rich and we're not getting it in too many other places. So that really is like one of my soapboxes, because we need it. We need to feel good about ourselves. And so many other cultures, I think I may have mentioned it, honor their past. You look at Jewish kids, they go to places where they're learning their languages, they're learning about their history and culture. I know Russian people who send their children to Russian school on the weekend. So again, they know their language, they know their culture, they know their history. And so many other cultures nurture and honor that. And I think we need to cultivate that as well, however that may manifest. So again, that's my soapbox, that we cultivate who we are and that we have a much firmer understanding of ourselves than the current narrative that Harriet Tubman freed the slaves and we all got on the back of the bus to ride to Washington, D.C. to hear Dr. King speak. It's a much broader narrative than that. So I'm committed to bringing that to people.
And that actually, I feel like that also connects to the first question I was going to ask the group, which is, this program is called Celebrating Black Futures. And, when we were putting that together, we were thinking of the idea of looking towards the future and a future where all Black lives matter. We're free to love each other and ourselves, and barriers to preventing that are removed. So I will ask Maya and then JSteezzy, if you want, you can talk about, you can respond to what Juarez said, and or you can also talk about how you imagine Black futures.
I think it's fair to say we can't imagine a Black future, a healthy Black future, without a critical mass of awareness about what our pasts have been prior to slavery and the last 400 years. Because Juarez is right, we get to cultivate ourselves and curate for ourselves what we want. My thinking about the future is that it is not something we can capture. It's something we can only create in the present. And so our responsibility is to be very attentive to our right now, from our individual selves as a starting point. And probably I say that because I'm an American and the individual is sort of tantamount to all things for us. But I'm also a Black American, which means that the collective is sort of central to our sense of rearing and survival, which is to say we have a responsibility to one another, and as much as we have, because we're part of an ecology, we're part of an earth system and a collective system of human being. And in order for us to have a future, we need to protect where we live. And I mean that, as a Marxist, in terms of like being attentive to our materials and how those materials are regulated, and that the people should be in charge of creating policies around it, but also in terms of like how we run our households, and for me that means including artwork in my day-to-day life and in the day-to-day interactions I have with my nibblings and with my aging parents, and you know, it ties back to this notion of us being both um, being tethered by both the past and the future, right now. That's my hippie, individualist, Black Marxist, womanist answer.
Appreciate it. And JSteezzy,
I think I feel like Black futures is just, in order for us to grow as a people, we must educate ourselves on where we, where our roots go. You know what I'm saying? How can you plant a seed in dirt you don't even know what the dirt is? I guess that was a messed up metaphor, but that's really like how I feel. I feel like in this current society, that especially with things that happened last year with the Black Lives Matter movement and things of those sorts, a lot of America's roots are starting to be more vocalized, and we're starting to force it. We're starting to force this narrative that we've always said it since day one, but we're just important that we're just putting in that we matter too. You know what I'm saying? So I think when I think of Black futures, I think of us coming together and us keep fighting for such a simple narrative that we've been fighting for since we were forced to come to this country.
so it is, I want to acknowledge it's 6:14. Are you okay if we go about 10 minutes, ask a couple more questions? If not,
Fine.
I'm okay.
yeah, great. All right. So I'll ask one more question of mine, and then ask one or two audience questions. What is the role of joy, beauty, or love, or all three in your work as you see it? And let's start with Maya this time.
What's the role of joy, beauty,
or love? Yeah.
Well, it's not a small question, is it? Yeah. So I just turned in my first full collection of poems, full-length book, and it's called All the Blood Involved in Love. And the more, as I've handed it off, I think, oh no, it can't possibly be finished. I need to snatch it back. One, because I'm protective and a little bit frightened, but also because I think I want more joy in it. There are things there are things all families choose not to talk about that are built into loving and sharing limited resources. And, that's what I mean by saying there's blood in it and love. But a thing about being Black is that we, because we're not divided from our histories and our art can't be separated from it, we have rhythm and blues, we have joy and pain. And it's part of the duality that colors what love means to us. And I'm speaking broadly, which I try to avoid doing, but I think that is something that's quintessential to Black art, is that it is both the sunshine and the rain, and maintaining that balance. And I think this actually answers one of the audience questions, which is how do you see other forms of art coming into your work? Is that I pull in music, because that is the first mode of storytelling, and certainly a mode of storytelling that's like highly focused on when my Afrocentric parents were teaching me to be Black in the world, that we talked first through rhythms, through drums. And so I don't see much Black art that is devoid of also music, and that's true of the visual artwork as well. And that music is you know, it's a multi-varied, textured rhythm and blues, but it is always the sunshine and the rain. I think bittersweet is my favorite um, artistic sensation. And I see it as a continuation of that duality. And I try to balance it in my poems between the sweetness and the like the hidden knife. Uh, I try to do the same in lyric essays. I'm not. I think that every essay I have is some like older cousin of a poem. So the lyric is built in. But I think again that's an extension of the music.
Thank you. And I personally, I really resonate with that bittersweet. It's just how I receive the world. JSteezzy, I'd love to hear how you see joy, beauty, and love in your work. And also, you're welcome if you want to talk about if and how you incorporate other art forms, which Maya mentioned. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so I incorporate certain things based off of certain memories. So I'm more of like a situational person. Like I don't really take a lot of pictures when I go out to places because I'm more if I'm gonna be in the moment, I want to be fully in the moment. So when I incorporate things like love or joy, I think of memories. And so when I think of these memories, I tend to tell the story about it, which also incorporates different art forms with things like visual arts. I really get a lot of inspiration from visual arts, like literally. Like I can stare at a picture and I just write down how it makes me feel, like literally. I just did that recently. I saw a picture and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna write something because this makes me feel a certain way. So that's how like I kind of incorporate those emotions. I incorporate those emotions on paper while also trying to convey such optimistic. I wouldn't say optimistic. I would say bittersweet. Yeah, that's me too. Bittersweet. I would say optimistic, but it's like, nah, it's kind of a bit of both.
Thank you. And the same question to you, Horace.
Um, been chewing on that and thinking about like where my work is now. I've always wanted the work to look good, feel good. I myself, there's a lot of ugliness in the world, and I'm not so much interested in being a purveyor of ugly visuals. There's a place for that. There's a place for that. And even if there are ugly emotions and things that we're going through, I still felt that there should be a more lyrical, dare I say, poetic way of expressing it. Because if I want to get you to see my point of view, I can't give you something that repels you. I want you to come in. So it might be color or it might be something tactile or something. I might have something to say that might not be very pleasant, but I want your experience of it to still be something that will visually engage you rather than repel. And that's, just my own take on it. Um, Speaking of love, I'm thinking just about evolution that's been popping up in my social media feed as well. And that idea of creating art. Again, a lot of us are dealing with this art that's coming from within. I really applaud young brother for coming forward with, such weighty material and being brave enough to come forward with it. And the beautiful thing about that, to be able to take that experience and turn it into catharsis and then turn that into art, it's nourishing for us as people that are going through it, but it's so valuable because there are other people that need it. I think Mark Twain said something about you can be the Bible verse that other person needs today. And, so you never know who's going to tap into what you're doing and say, oh, yeah, ooh, I get that. So maybe that's the love. That's the stuff that keeps us going, that need to continue to, well, I love making too. I love just putting stuff together and loading materials and things and trying to figure out how to press all that into the service of, you know, what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to express, you know, getting that navel gazing going on. Because you know, I'm thinking about like the work of my 20s was very, very angry, very, very strident, very, and, you know, and then I came by it honest. But the beauty of it is that as you move through it, you move into spaces where that tranquility begins to happen. I'm not saying my life is perfectly happy or anything like that, but I'm just been thinking about work that's, you know, I had a lot of tunnels in my work for one period of time, you know, that need to keep coming out, need to address evolution. So to sort of be able to document those things, and, you know, it's like a visual journal for me to be able to kind of keep that process going, whether anyone ever sees them or not. But I think it's very important work. And I think that there's some very important work to put out in the world, because the world's kind of hurting right now. And, you know, and some of us are hurting too. And, you know, there's ways of just, moving through it sounds so glib, but I guess that's, you know, the best expression I have right now. It might be a more slow movement to push through it, but we do have to find creative ways to move through this stuff. And as I get older, I'm finding a lot of it is rooted in that idea of love, not just but this idea of really being at peace with ourselves, and then once I'm kind of at peace here, it's a lot easier for me to deal with the world. I can deal with it a lot more readily. I can come more from a place that's more open, less angry, less hostile and things. And it's not saying there isn't a place for anger, but saying that I'm not like fostering something that's going to be self-destructive to me. Let's find a place for that anger. Let's direct it into action or something like that, rather than keeping it all in here and it's tearing me up physically and psychically and all those sorts of things. So that's really, I think, one of the joys of getting older and coming through. And so, you know, I'm all for, let's, you know, tell our stories, bring our life forward, however we're going to do it. So back to the question of mixing media, my master's is in interdisciplinary art. So I am interested in painting and clay and textiles and weaving, and I said printmaking. I just hooked my keyboards up the other day so that I can kind of pull that sort of stuff in too. I studied voice for a couple of years. So being able to write about my life and then set that to music is really a juicy thing that I've missed. So I'm eager to get back to that. And I won't ramble on. I won't ramble on, but that's some of it.
Oh, thank you. No, you have a lot. So yeah, thank you. So I am going to just want to ask one quick audience question and then we'll conclude. And this question is, as an educator, I know that a lot of the most meaningful learning happens outside of the classroom. What spaces do you learn the most? Speaking for yourself. And this time, let's start with JSteezzy. And also, I agree, Maya. I love to hear where I speak.
So you said what spaces do I learn from the most?
Yeah. What spaces do you learn in the most outside of a classroom?
Um, I know it's going to be extremely broad, but I'm young, so I say life, just life in general. Like I learned so much just from, because living in Chicago, you see a lot, you know what I'm saying, a lot that you probably shouldn't see, and you know people that do certain things. But I feel like life just in general is just such a just every day something new is happening. Although it's the same, it's although nothing's new under the sun, something's always happening. Some art is always being created. A child is always being born. You know, I feel like life just in general is so like you learn so much just from living, just from breathing, just from going to the grocery store, just from going to the bank, taking care of simple things. I take joys in that. I take joys in going to shopping with going grocery store with my mama, although I know she takes 30 million hours to pick out one thing.
Not 30
But I
million.
enjoy it. I enjoy it because I learn, and I know moments like this I don't get always. You know what I'm saying? I don't get these moments always. that's why I feel like life just in general is one of the biggest teachers to me, because I'm always learning. If that answered the question in a very good way.
Answered it beautifully, perfectly. Thank you. And let's go with Juarez.
Lately, I have to admit, I've become like a YouTube junkie. It's just like, oh my God, there's so much stuff I can learn. I have Domestika accounts and what Open Studio, and there's Udemy, because it's just like, now that we're more inside more, it's like, okay, there's a little bit more time to do some of these things and uncap all these little stones that I've been curious about. And so I'm just stoked. I'm sort of like, oh man, how can people be bored? There's so much cool stuff to learn and pick up on. So right now, I think I'm really kind of sucking down a lot of this sort of digital remote learning stuff. But I mean, like Diane Reeves did a jazz improvisation course. I mean, not even to say I'd ever be a better musician, but just the joy of listening to Diane Reeves talk and sing, so those have been jazzing me. And then because of the podcast, I'm looking at a lot of children's books, which has really just been a real adventure. And it touches back on like being a kid and being in the library and coming home with a big pile of books. As I was a bookish little girl too, I can relate, Maya. But to be able to find that right book for that right story, that curation process is getting very exciting. And just, again, the sheer wealth of good writing that's out there for young people now is just like nothing short of amazing. So those are probably my pockets right now.
I love that you say those are jazzing me. I want to use that phrase this week. It's jazzing. Yeah, I mean, I read for a living, so I learn all sorts of things in the books, which is where I've spent all of my life. Yeah, I learned from talking to other people, and because like that's a thing I loved about being a person who worked as a barista for 12 or 13 years, or being a bartender, is that we are just little galaxies walking around, who have all sorts of connective wormholes that lead us from one person to another, and that conversation shows all the connections. So it's been a silver lining of the quarantine has been being able to connect with people from all over the world, because the events are digital. And so if we can connect online, we can talk in the chat and hear about, music or playlists or pieces of artwork, or there's like open gallery exhibits that you can go to through digital collections. And so I do that. Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Well, thank you. I could keep talking to you, but I won't. I'll let everyone go. But thank you so much. I'm here as a moderator and through the library, but I have gotten personally so much out of being here with you that I thank you just on a personal level. And hopefully we can get you all to come back for another program sometime.
I'd love to. I want to just thank you for curating an intergenerational conversation. I think that there are not, I don't encounter many of them, but I feel being in the middle here, I'm pretty sure I'm in the middle here, like that I just learned from both sides, and I'm grateful for it. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's something I hope that we can continue doing. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So I guess I'll have to end it now. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. This was wonderful. I really enjoyed it.
Me too.
Wonderful.
Good stuff.